This is Platemark with me, Ann Schaefer. I'm an independent curator who specializes in works on paper, prints, drawings, and photographs, but my special love is prints and printmaking. I make Platemark because there are so many people who work in this ecosystem who have fascinating and amazing stories to tell about how they got in it, what they do to contribute to it, and how they are pushing forward with their own work and the work of others. I love talking to printers and artists, I think the most, although of course my colleague curators are also fun to talk to. But today's guest is an artist and printer. She is Susan Goldman, who is the founder and owner of Lily Press in Rockville, Maryland. She's also an artist. In addition, Susan is a documentary filmmaker. She made a film, years ago now, called Midwest Matrix, which focused on the amazing network of print shops and printmakers in the Midwest in the United States. And she is currently working on a documentary about Lloyd Menard of Frogman's. So she is dedicated to preserving the histories of all of these wonderful people. And so in that way, we are much aligned. Susan reflects on her collaborations with artists, emphasizing the significance of community in printmaking, which we all agree is key and one of the best parts about it. We talk about how working with others influences her own work and also how she approaches balancing her practice with the support and promotion of other artists. Susan is also exhibiting at the Brooklyn Fine Art Print Fair coming up this week, if you can believe it. No, is that true? Oh my God. Yep, coming up this week, Lily Press will be at the fair in Brooklyn at Powerhouse Arts. Details about the Brooklyn Fine Art Print Fair are over at its website, brooklynprintfair.org. You can go over there and see who else is going to be showing there. We've got 74 exhibitors, I think it is, and we have lots of great programming, and I think it will be worth your while to come on over. You can buy tickets on the website, and I hope you all, if you're in the neighborhood, come by and see us. All right, let's see. Housekeeping. I identify as a cishet white woman, and I use the pronouns she, her. I record Platemark in Baltimore, Maryland, the land of the Piscataway Conway people. Images Susan and I talk about are over in the show notes at platemarkpodcast.com. All right, let's get rolling. Susan, it's so great to see you. Thanks for coming on Platemark.
Thank you for the invitation.
Oh, of course.
I believe in what you do, and I'm thrilled to be here. So I'm a supporter of Platemark. I think it's really important, and I'm really happy to be a part of this today.
Great. Thank you. It's, it's a labor of love, as you know, but I think it's totally worth it. So call me the head cheerleader. I think you're right up there with me on the head cheerleader part. So we'll get to that in a sec. Can you introduce yourself for everybody?
I'm Susan Goldman, and I am director and founder of Lily Press, where I'm sitting today. And I'm also director and founder of Printmaking Legacy Project, a nonprofit devoted to preserving the history of printmaking, legacies, and history for future generations.
And you do that through film, right?
I do that. I make short documentaries on artists, primarily printmaking artists.
The one that I first saw of yours that I was like, I need to go meet this person because I realized you're just an hour away from me, was the Midwest Matrix from 2012, which I just rewatched. I had to dig out my old laptop that had a CD player in it. But it was so great to get all those people on film, so great.
Yeah, that was the start into the documentary world for me. And it really came out of my love for printmaking, and I didn't really know what I was getting into. It took about 8 years to really build that story. I would be invited to be a visiting artist, and I would take that money and I'd hire a video camera person, and I would put the camera on the artists that I was working with or faculty that were at that institution. So it's got every iteration of video, format, from the old films to, chips now. So, yeah, so it was truly a labor of love.
Yeah. But well, I mean, such a great document. It's tremendous. Anyway, we'll talk more about that shortly. Okay, so my first question usually is, besides introduce yourself, is I always want to know how people found prints in the first place, because it's not an obvious find.
I went to Indiana University, Bloomington as my undergraduate. I'm from Cincinnati, Ohio. It was far enough away from home, 2 hours, and close enough to home. And I had no idea. I just thought I liked the school and there was a lot of choice there. I had no idea what I was going to pursue, but I knew I wanted to do art. I started out in painting, had wonderful teachers, but you had to take a course out of your discipline. And so I enrolled in a printmaking class. And that was it. Because I was like, the printmaking department, well, Rudy Pizzotti was the lead professor, Marvin Lowe and Wendy Cowman. And I remember, you took a practicum where you had, 4 weeks in intaglio, 4 weeks in silkscreen, or 4 weeks in litho. The printmaking faculty came in and Rudy was really electric. He had these giant woodcut blocks. And I was I had no idea, but I thought, this is it. They were exciting. I thought the printmakers were much more interesting. I love painting, but they had a terrific graduate program there. So the grad students taught the undergrads, obviously. But they were really diverse. And also I noticed at painting at IU, a lot of, teachers, students would imitate their professors. And in printmaking, there was just more diversity. But I just know that I loved the community of it and, the making of prints. So that's how it started. I started out in intaglio. And then I took litho, and I'd always forget to rosin and talc and gum the stone and run down and call my friend and go, oh my God, I forgot to put the rosin and talc. And I'm like, don't worry, we'll make it work. But then I took a silkscreen portion of it. And that was when I really got pulled in and became a BFA printmaking student. And the rest is history, I guess. But I didn't realize what an incredible art department was there at the time, but that's where it started.
What was it about screen prints that got you?
I think color, and I was trained back in the day. I feel like sort of a dinosaur, but you took an etching class and you spent a whole week beveling the plate. And litho, you had to grain the stone, and it was so terrifying to finally get it right. And then you were supposed to draw on it. And I was so intimidated by it because I thought, oh, if I draw on this, I'm going to have to, how am I going to get the drawing out? And I'm going to have to get the levigator, and I'm going to have to grain it again. And it felt really terrifying. But silkscreen was really direct, and it was positive to positive. Plus, I really found my mentor, Wendy Cowman, was the professor of printmaking there. And it was just a gas. I remember our first assignment, we had these bones. She had pelvic bones from cattle and so forth that we drew. And then we had to do, stencil prints. And I remember it was oil-based ink too. And I remember the first printing, it was 3 or 4 people where she's print, pull, put the proof under there, move. It was this excitement of energy around, oh my God, how the heck is this going to work? But it was just so exciting. And, it was color, and you could do so much with it quickly, so easily. So that's why I think I really fell in love with screen printing then.
Were the cow pelvic bones, were you photo screen exposing, or were you cutting a stencil?
No, we had IU when I grew up, we didn't do anything from photographs. I mean, there was photolitho then. I mean, there was photo chemicals, and there were Kodalith. Okay, at the time, photography was really entering into things, but they didn't allow you to do photo till later in your classes. So we had to draw from life, and these were paper stencils. You had to, good old newsprint, because oil-based ink would not penetrate newsprint. It was a great resist. We also had to do card registration. They didn't give us pin registration till our, second semester or something. And we're like, God, why didn't you give it to us at the beginning? It was all direct drawing on the screen and LePage's glue for block out. And, we were like WPA artists with lacquer thinner cleaning out the ink. I mean, it was very toxic, but it was delicious. Yeah, it was.
I, I didn't know that about oil-based inks and newsprint.
Yeah, yeah. You had to buy your own cans of inks. I mean, they had very good ventilation. They had tables and they had fans that drew out right across your table. So it was really a great studio at IU. And John Whitesell, who's a marvelous screen printer, was a graduate student then, but he taught at University of Louisville eventually. But he set up the whole studio. And I didn't know that till I interviewed him. But you had your own table and you had drawers and you had a window. There were windows in this particular studio, and they had a fan because it was the old bunkers from World War II, or it was the old housing they'd converted into studios. So there were windows. So each window, so it was still stinky and toxic, but and I think we wore gloves. Yeah, of course we wore gloves, and we had masks. Some of us later, but it was oil-based inks up into water-based inks, which Lois Johnson, who was at University of the Arts in Philly, she's now deceased, but she kind of wrote the manual on Hunt Speedball back in the probably 80s, I think. Yeah, but so when water-based silkscreen ink, you could no longer use good old newsprint for your paper stencils. You had to use resist. That was the conundrum of water-based ink, so that your stencil base.
I find that fascinating. I mean, it must be the sizing in the newsprint or something.
Well, I mean, the oil-based, it doesn't leak, it doesn't go through. I mean, oil-based inks dry really flat. They're fantastic. I mean, they're
yeah.
It's not the water-based problem. But I mean, now there's tons of inks that are good and the colors are good. But back in the day, you could print like 20 or 30 prints with a newsprint stencil. It wouldn't leak through.
That's amazing. I did not know that. Jesus. Well, so there must be some period of time between finishing at IU and starting Lily Press. What were the intervening years occupied? Well, having kids probably.
Well, I graduated from Indiana, and then I went directly to graduate school, Arizona State in Tempe. And I was there 3 years, and there was still oil-based ink there when I remember in the screen print room. And I was there 3 years. But when I graduated, I really didn't want to go off and teach in some faraway school. I was working as apprentice for Fritz Scholder, the painter, and different artists I worked with. And I got a Arizona Commission on the Arts was just being built at that time. So I got a year residency teaching little kids. And, they paid really well. So I had many jobs like community college, private high school teaching. I did a little bit of everything. But the Arizona Commission on the Arts, I got a year residency, and I went into, I think, 13 schools in this particular area in Arizona. And I had a little cart, and I used to cut lacquer stencils for all these kids, and we printed. I was the art lady that came in, and taught that. So I constantly was teaching part-time, and I bought a press, and I had it in my garage, and ended up, whatever I did, I don't remember. It was so long ago, but I mean, I always thought I was like, I want to have time to do my work, but yet I had 3 jobs and no health insurance, that kind of thing, but it was okay. I was there 9 years in Arizona, and then relocated. I met my husband there, and we moved to DC. He went to the American University to get a master's. And then that's where I started at Pyramid Atlantic at that time.
And I also I've forgotten this chapter.
Yeah, I taught at the Torpedo Factory classes. I worked at Pyramid Atlantic. I taught at the Corcoran part-time and Micah. I was a ROAD scholar, so I taught a lot of places. And eventually, over time, I was always printing with people. Even out west in my garage, I had friends. We'd come in and print on my press. And then after I left Pyramid Atlantic, because I did start having children, 2 daughters, I ended up beginning Lily Press. I lived in Silver Spring and I had this big press in the basement of a tiny house. And then we took it apart and I moved it to a temporary studio. And then we moved to this house. So all that time I worked with people in my studio. So I think around 2000 we moved here, and 2005 I truly established Lily Press as an entity. Yeah.
But in all the while you're making your own work too.
Yes. Yeah.
So yeah, the balance there has always fascinated me because, I mean, I guess you can schedule when people are coming in to use the studio with you, but it's hard to get the oomph. Well,
yeah,
I don't have the need to create every day. If you're an artist, I think you do probably.
Yeah.
So how do you balance it?
Well, my life is a three-ring circus. People always say to me, you do so much, you do so much. And, but I love what I do, and I don't see them as separate things. I mean, it's all part of a whole life. And I feel like the printmaking studio is sort of interdisciplinary naturally, and there's always something going on in it. It took a while to figure out how to make it work, and that I always make time to do my own work. That's always been a priority. But I feed off the energy. It's sort of, I like it. Like you wear many hats too, and it just jazzes you up and you love it. Like I'm not resentful if I'm working with somebody, like, oh, it's taking time away from me. And I don't feel that kind of ego sense is like, it's all about my work and I'm the best person in the room. I've never felt like that. In fact, it took a long time to actually accept that I really was an artist. I know I'm an artist, but I always felt like, I have this ideal growing up that artists had to suffer and struggle and be miserable. And I was raised in a very supportive home and, blessedly with a lot of protection and love and follow your dream kind of thing. So I was never really in conflict about how am I going to do this, because I had help. My family helped me when I needed help. So I always felt like, well, I'm not really an artist because, I'm not struggling enough. now it's changed. No, but that 19th century view of what an artist is like an illusion, or it fit a certain different type of history. A lot of families would say you shouldn't be an artist. You're not going to make a living. But I felt like there were a lot of traditional ways you could go about doing it. And printmaking is a great way because you can earn a living by working with artists and printing. It's a great thing. And so I think, how do I always do it? Well, I feel like that's just sort of a built-in component to being a printmaker. I think it really is, because printmaking deals with graphic design. It deals with photography. It deals with coordinating groups of people to make something happen. So it's sort of an innate quality to the medium that you're partnering with people. And that's helped me make this work, if that makes sense.
Sure. No, sure. Yeah, I think the people part is, I don't know, I feel like the painter types are such individualistically minded people. And I think the printmakers, like, it draws the people who need people, Yeah, I feel like I get energy from people when I'm working. And if I'm sitting alone in my desk too long, I get crabby. But they always, they always sort of bring all the energy up. All works. Yeah, I agree with you. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, so tell us about your work a little bit. I own a print of yours, which is in my pile to go to the framer, as many things are. But tell us about your work and what you're up to.
I'm currently really excited about my work. I had a breakthrough moment around 2018. I came into the studio and I think I was just overwhelmed with everything. And all I wanted to do was just print solid color. I have no interest in an image. I came in and I just said, I want to do blocks of color. And I was exploring this Victorian flower, woodcuts of these flower forms. And I put down like a red block and a yellow block. And I topped it off with a black print of a flower, an appropriated, one of those free imagery things you can get. Which one are those? Oh, the Dover books. Yeah. Okay. It was like
Oh,
the Dover.
yeah.
A free Dover flower. I came into the studio and I put down a red square and this yellow square, and I usurped a Dover Victorian black flower. And I was like, oh my God, this really feels good. Also, I was thinking of the Greek idea of the circle and the square, because I was thinking, could a flower fit inside of a circle? And, it is a circle, the blossom. And that's what kind of led into this whole group of prints I've been doing the last few years called Squaring the Flower, so squaring the circle. And it was just from pure wanting, just pure color and kind of crossing the chaos out in my life. So when I come into the studio, when I'm working with other people, I'm very focused and everything. But when I do my own work, I come in and I'm free. And I print with, Corey Oberndorfer, who helps me print. He's very precise, and he always comes in to help me print. He goes, I'm just so nervous, Susan, because you're like, nothing really lines up. And I said, that's okay, because he's very precise when we do his work. But when I come in, people always say, oh, your lines are so straight and everything. They really aren't, and they're really off. But what happens is when this overprinting, an error of borders and margins hit, the different colors come through that I would never have been able to do on a concerted effort. It's more intuitive and like, oh, that's interesting. And it's something that is fun to correct. I'm trying to always correct the square. I guess I should call the next series Correcting the Square, because my framer's like, these borders are really off. But that's where the idea came from. And so it's really been a lot of fun with this format. Although I'm also thinking, it has become a device, where artists get into a routine of what works. And I don't know, like you think of Morandi, I always think he painted the same little vases over and over. So you could do that. Right now I'm kind of contemplating how to break out of that square, because it's very comfortable. But it's really helped me to play with a lot of ideas I've been working with for a long time that I'm not always conscious of. I'm like, oh my God, I did this, 20 years ago, and an image or an idea. Because sometimes where it came from in my early work, I did still lifes, bowls of onions and turnips and things. And what happened was I started photographing them actually in grad school. Like I would do aerial photos of this bowl of, say, onions, and on a patterned placemat, and it compresses it and turns it into flat. It flattens it. So hence you've got the circle and I've got this square, So there is a trail, but that's where
there is definitely. I'm always amazed at those trails, and I've talked to kind of a lot of artists at this point. And I always want to ask the question of, because I've heard people say, it took 15 years for me to figure out what I was actually doing in that work, that these things sort of just come along and perk and perk and perk before you're even aware that they're there.
Yeah.
I find it fascinating.
And it's also, you wonder, like you go through your drawers and you go, oh my God, I've got so much work from so long ago. And part of me is like, I want to throw this out. And part of me is like, well, it's like that Marie Kondo. Does it give you joy? Should I get rid of it? Should I keep it? And, I'm hanging on to certain things because I know there's certain people, like they just jettison and clean. And part of me is not quite ready. But I do think, even if you're super knowledgeable about what you supposedly say you're doing, I think there's just, because the way you're made, your DNA and what you respond to, these tracks are in there. They just come back in different ways.
How are you at keeping records about your work and the shop's work?
I'm getting better and better. I just completed some work with some artists. So we document everything, and there's certificates of authenticity. You just have to remember to have the artist sign them, and be very thorough. And sometimes it's hard being the printer and the director in this, and then also maintaining the records. Like I don't have one person that comes in. I have sort of teams of people. I build teams per project, and I have part-time assistants. A lot of them are younger kids, between sometimes out of college and between the next step. And a lot of them are my former students that I have maintained really good relationships with that are working with me. So, I have a really good group of people around me right now. So, like Liz and, Idrissa Sidibe was from the Baltimore Print Fair, and he came to this booth 2 years in a row and said, I really would like to help you out if you ever need help. And he is an angel on the earth.
Aw.
He's an amazing young man. So thank you very much for all the
You're welcome. When I was running the fair at the BMA, at the museum, we would always get a list of MICA students that were available to help people install or hang or pack up or unpack. And we've kept that going. So at the Baltimore Fair, we assembled this list again. And so you go on and, Justin was working with Huck and he's going to the woodcut boot camp. And, and that was the whole point, was to make those connections and help people expand their network. So I'm glad it worked.
It does. Thank you very much.
Well, and it's so good for them, just to see what a professional shop's like and whatever.
He's a wonderful young man. And I mean, I kept saying to him, I don't have any place. The second year at the fair that I attended, I saw him again and I said, I don't have anything right now, but I haven't forgotten you. And then I did call him and he came, and it's just been magical. Yes. And actually his mother, I finally got to meet his mom, and she came over. She's an artist too. He goes, can I mix some ink for her? She got a job printing anniversary cards for somebody. And then he came last week with the card and the envelope and said, so it's just wonderful.
Yeah. You're paying it forward. Oh, that's cool. Oh, that makes me happy.
Yeah.
So you've done your work and you've worked with other artists the whole time, it sounds like. Like, it's always been the intention to keep both of those trains going. But like, how do you decide who you want to work with? And I mean, what's that process like?
Well, I have people that basically they reach out to me. I haven't really approached. There's certain people within the community over the years, like Renee Stout. We've known each other, and I said, I always say we should make a print together. That's usually how it starts. We should make a print together. And Renee came. 2010 was our first opportunity, and she mostly has made etchings, I think, only with Lily Press. I mean, she does lithography and screen with other people. And the artists that come to work with me, their hands are in it. I mean, they don't just come in and say, here's my print, here's my idea. I want 30 of these. I'll see you in a couple of months. They're hands-on, the artists. I think that's one of the things that I usually insist upon. I haven't had any situations like that. There are artists like Victor Ekpuk we worked with. He came and he said he wanted to make a print. And so he came to the studio and we did a proof and he left. He didn't have to stay here when we ran it. But typically they're pretty involved. And then I worked with Sam Gilliam. I met him through the Midwest Matrix project. That's when I interviewed him. And then there was a thing at George Mason. And then he called me up and said, I want to print with you. And I almost fell off the chair. I was like, oh my God. I was scared. Actually, he worked with Bill Weege in that film, Bill Weege. And so he actually called and said, I want to print over a print from Bill, because they would send prints back and forth all the time. And I'm like, okay. And then he called a week later and he said, well, actually, I don't want to do that. I want to do my own print. And I'm like, okay. And I said, you might want to come to my studio and see, what it feels like. And if it's, and he did come and we had a long talk. And then he goes, we'll start next week. So we ended up playing around, but he was really terrific because he really created work that I could manage in my studio. We didn't do I can't do huge, I don't have the space. So our work was somewhat manageable, but someone that was just such an opportunity of great mentorship to work with him and his love of printmaking. And he just was, I think you saw those school bus prints.
I love those.
But, that's why I do like working with artists, because it helps me learn. I don't want to just do the same thing over and over again. And I'm not the kind of studio where someone comes in and I'll say, you can only have 5 colors. There are shops that you can only do this many, you can only have this. I've experienced that when I was somewhere and I wasn't able
Whoa.
to. Yeah, like we only have 5 colors. It was a lithograph.
What?
Yeah, I mean, and people, it's everybody's, and every artist that comes in, like the way I calibrate the cost and the way it's totally different every time. Even if I've done like a silkscreen, it's never the same, ever, never. And a lot of shops come out with a certain look to them. I mean, maybe back in the day they did. I don't know if it's so much like that now. That might be something to look at. Like I remember, Tyler Graphics, everything had a certain, feel about it, and not bad, but just you definitely could tell a quality to the work. So
I think that's true. You can always pick a crown point press etching off the wall,
Yeah, you can. Yeah. So
with a lot of looking people. Sorry.
No, I meant it's true. I mean, you think of Dennis O'Neill, when God bless him, Handprint Studio definitely had a certain feel to the silk screens. He did something so unique to his process. And I don't know if Lily Press really has that. I look at it. I think the first time, actually, thanks to you, Ann Schaefer, at the Baltimore Print Fair, this is a plug, the first year, I remember asking you, should I put up just a few or everything? And you're like, put it all up. So, and that was, well, you were saying salon style. I have to tell you, I was blown away by all the work that had been produced here from your fair. That was the first time I'd ever had Lily Press, out in a print fair. I've done shows of Lily Press, but not really, in an encapsulated booth to see what was there. And I was like, oh my God, when did this all, it was kind of a strange sensation.
I kind of love that. When I first started doing the fair at the Baltimore Museum, one of my sort of bullet points was, you'll never see this many prints on the wall ever again in the same space. And so I'm always like, put them all up. I want to see everything.
Well,
why not?
Yeah, I know. I mean, there's, doing more, thanks to you, I've made entrees into art on paper. I think from Baltimore Print Fair, Art on Paper reached out to some of the exhibitors there. And so I've done that 2 years in a row. I mean, they did. They said, I think so. I don't know if you know that, but I don't know how else
I didn't.
But I think the Art on Paper reached out and said, because of Baltimore Print Fair, we'd like to invite you to Art on Paper. And
that's
so,
exciting.
Seeing how booths are set up, one thing I love about, like, people say, I do so much, is I do love the business of art, like the good business of it. It's exciting. I mean, the greatest pleasure in the world is to have somebody buy a piece of your work. And people might say, oh, I don't care if I sell my work or whatever, but it sure feels really good when you do. And when I sell a work of an artist that I've produced, or the Krieger Museum, the Washington Print Club, they just opened the print. It's beautiful. And I put one of Corey Oberndorfer's prints in there, and Eve Stockton, I have one of hers. But Corey's work was included a lot on publicity. And I was like, this is so cool. Look, Corey. And he was like, oh my God, And so I like when good things happen to the people I work with. And I like it a lot. And it's affirming, and it's very exciting. And, that's what I think gives me energy. Like I was saying, you get energy from probably talking to people or seeing it come out. And it's not like it's gratuitous ego stuff. It's good work, and it's keeping printmaking alive,
Yes. All boats rise.
Yeah. So
yeah, we're in the all boats rise business, Susan.
The cheerleaders need to print some.
That's right.
You know what I'm working on now?
I do want to know. So, the reason I knew you were doing this thing was because of this video you did 10, 12 years ago about the Midwest shops and their effect on the entire ecosystem. And then you've done subsequent films since then. One was pretty recent about the two printmakers in Washington, D.C.
Michael Platt and Percy
Platt.
Martin.
That's right.
Platt and Percy Martin, yes.
Yeah. Well, so what are you doing now?
I'm currently working on Lloyd Menard. It's almost finished. Lloyd Menard from Frogman's. I mean, I'm embarrassed that it's not done because I had some shift in my staff and editing, and because it's sort of like one person juggling, but we're back on track. It's almost finished, and I would like to finish it, while Lloyd is still thankfully on the planet. He's living in Nebraska, and he doesn't answer his phone. He's like, because I'm deaf, I don't hear it. And I'm like, oh my God, Lloyd, you've got to pick up your phone. But that's almost completed because it's his story and it's fabulous. In it, I'm featuring Rochelle Toner. They were very close friends. And I'm doing a documentary on Rocky Toner. I've got all the interview done and the editing is yet to happen. She's an important, incredible artist. I had a really interesting experience, which I'll tell you about in a minute. But essentially, the two that I'm working on now, soon to be completed this year, will be Lloyd Menard and then Rochelle Toner. So then I'm sort of taking a little break to catch up with myself because I get so excited interviewing people. And then I don't want it to be waiting to be done. That bothers me. So.
Having to produce a every other week interview, I have a stack up. I mean, I'm stacked up till March, I think, at this point. But, as soon as you feel like you're running ahead, you're behind.
Oh, yeah.
So, and that that freaks me out.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you just have to just keep going. But it's important. You've got it recorded. That's the important part. Yeah.
Yeah.
But Rochelle Toner is really interesting because she actually lives on the Eastern Shore. She lives outside Chestertown, Maryland. She's between Philly and there. I wanted to interview her to talk about Lloyd because she tells how they first met. And it's quite a funny story. But out of that, I got her entire interview. She has a beautiful home. And she's currently works on watercolors and drawings all the time. In fact, I brought her prints to the second Baltimore Print Fair. And who's the gentleman from Philly, the gallerist from Philadelphia?
Ron Rumford is with Dolan Maxwell?
Yes, Dolan Maxwell. So he came up to the booth and he goes, I'm so thrilled to see Rocky's work here because I think they have represented her for quite some time. And she's really important. What's really interesting is she's a very shy, quiet, not shy person, but she's not a self-promoter. She said, but Lloyd was the one who took her work all around the Midwest and sold it. And she said, if it wasn't for him, he was the one that really exposed her. And that back in the day, people in the Midwest and so forth, they sent their work together in packages to print shows. That was the way they got seen. And when I first started the Midwest Matrix, out of that story there was always a major print exhibit at the Library of Congress in Washington. And all those people would send their prints. And I'd asked Catherine Blood about it way back. It'd be so cool if you could do like a print competition at the Library of Congress. But she's like, they're so short-staffed and it's just really not a doable thing. But anyway, so out of that history, I'm trying to cover some of these people and finish up those pieces.
How do you decide? There's so many people to interview. Oh my gosh. How do you decide? Oh my God.
Well, I also have like some things that like John Whitesell. He's amazing. You should interview him. He was University of Louisville. He's retired, but he's like one of the quintessential screen printers. And he does these moire patterns and color, and he knows so much about so many things. And they actually did print with Sam because they have a big collection of Gilliams because Sam was from Louisville. So there's just like, you can find out when you're talking to people, it's like tributaries and everything runs off. So I did have an idea for a project that I started, and it's called 5,000 Years to 5 Seconds. I'd like to do something with the concept of digital printmaking to traditional printmaking, in that, in a second you can make a print. And I've interviewed several people But that's kind of on the back burner. I'm curious how certain artists you view digital printmaking now, because it is here. And there's been so many improvements with it. And I mean, I do it in my own work, and I actually generate digital prints for people too. And so going to different print fairs, you see how much of the work is out there, whether it's good or it's bad. And so that's kind of a discussion I think I would like to explore, because I called, who's the guy in Oakland who has the big press out there, Magnolia Editions?
Oh,
You should interview him. He's an amazing printer. But I saw online that they had this giant printer, can print 7 feet to like 24 feet. I can't think of his name right now, but he's printed with Chuck Close, and he printed with Hung Lu, her show, and they do pulp painting out there too. And I called him up and I said, like, what do you think about the digital printing? And I loved, he goes, because this particular machine actually drops ink. It doesn't drop watercolor. It's acrylic pigment that hits it. And so Enrique Chagoya's worked a lot with him and done these codexes, and they do have a different look to them. I'd be curious what you think about them. He said, well, if Rembrandt was around, you could be sure he'd be playing around with this digital printing. So I figured. It's very, very interesting, because, you know, there are some steadfast opinions about, is it really a print, or is it, you know, that kind of thing.
I probably fall in the old school end of that one. I mean, I don't mind if there's elements of digital in there, but I don't want the whole thing to be digital. Like, you know, like I want to see some of the artist's hand.
The artist's hand is in there, but in a different way. I mean, not
in a different way.
Generated type of thing. But I would like to see some discussion of that. That would be interesting, I think. At this point in time, I think it would be, to see where things are, just from curiosity. And then the other thing I've noticed as I've gotten more mature over time, that, you know, you see things and it's stuff you've seen before, and I don't want to lose my enthusiasm of what's new and interesting. Always in printmaking, everybody's like, I just found out the other day, they've done away with the whole print department at RIT. It's gone.
Wow.
And that used to be like the cutting edge of print technology, right? I mean, I think it's been gone for some time, but I was shocked to hear that. I know when I did that project, the Midwest Matrix, and I interviewed Garon Trajan, and he was so elegant. I interviewed him at Landfall Press in Santa Fe. He was just such an elegant person. And those kind of people, you know, I don't want people like them to be forgotten. And like Jack Lemmon is retired. And then Tom Huck bought Jack Lemmon's big press. So, you know, all those kinds of lines of history. But
more press provenance for you.
Yes, there we go. Yes. Follow the press.
Yeah, exactly.
We should get like a freight train and put a press on it, and like that would be. You know, the Barnum and Bailey posters, they print them off the back of a train.
Oh my heavens!
They had a lizard. Yeah. So anyway,
and I think it may be different because you're an artist as well, but I've been debating with other people, if you have a system for approaching a work of art that you've not seen before, and how do you assess it and decide whether it's good, bad, beautiful, you know, beautifully ugly? Like, do you have a system that you kind of run through your brain?
I usually have a gut response to something. Maybe that ties into what I was saying before, where you get a little jaded and you think you know everything, right? And you go up and you go, oh, well, that's, you know, everyone's, you know, that kind of thing. And that's dangerous. And I once had a professor, actually Leonard Lair was one of my professors. He's at ASU, a noted printmaking person. And he was funny because he said once, he goes up to a work of art, he says, you know, an artist works maybe, you don't know how long they're working on it. And a viewer comes up and walks by in like 5 seconds. And he said, so keeping that in mind, you know, kind of standing with something a little longer than you normally would. I'm guilty of it too. I'll sail by something. And especially today, because we're so like our attention span is so reduced by technology and phones and everything. But one time there was some work that was really, he didn't know what to say. And he said to this person, I really feel like this work makes me nervous. Like it really makes me nervous. He didn't criticize it, but he's like, I'm nervous about this, as a way of like digesting it. I think I go through kind of quick and then I come back, if I'm in a show. But I tend to respond to work that gets me in my gut, like it's collecting, like I have to have it, or there's a connection that I get. And it might not be basically images. It's just the way the artist has put it together. I think printmakers are always looking at work, trying to dissect it, maybe more than a painter. You go up and you go, how did they do that? And I wonder what they used. And that's what I go up to when I'm looking at a work of art. I go up and I'm like, I wonder how, obviously the first impression is, wow, or that's something that just gets me right in my stomach. And I get kind of goosebumps. And then I'm like, how did they do that? And sometimes you just get it. It's like a spiritual experience. Yeah.
Yeah, I think the people who are deeply in printing, and I think the baseline is, how did they do that? And for me, in the curatorial realm, I can tell an etching from a lithograph, but I sometimes can't tell exactly what the layers are, how they've managed to manipulate this, that, or the other. And for me, my next question always goes to, however he or she got this made, does it help tell the story of the subject? So I go through this litany of things. I have a long list, which are published somewhere, and people know me for them. Yeah, it's hard to. You have to invest time. I think time is the critical element. Like I interviewed Jennifer Roberts recently, and she assigns her students a 3-hour looking thing, and it got written up in the New York Times, this assignment, not too long ago. And the image that they used was this Whistler painting of I don't think it was the skyrockets, but it was a nocturne. And the student who had stared at it for 3 hours had figured out that the reflections in the water actually were crossing. They weren't directly reflective, up to down. It was like the lighthouse on the right was reflected in the water on the lower left corner. And there was this whole manipulation of how the light was. It was crazy. And if you hadn't sat there for 3 hours, you would never or even wondered about it. And as she says, the longer you look at something, the less familiar it gets. It gets weird. It's like if you say a word too many times, it starts sounding impossible.
Yes.
And it's it's kind of an exercise in your brain to parse it out and figure it out. But I thought, gosh, I was impressed with that idea that Whistler could have manipulated the light like that. And why,
My dad always used to say, you mental leapfrog. When he'd ask me questions like, what is this? What are you doing? And I'm like, blah, blah, blah. And he's like, well, you're mental leapfrogging. Like I already know intuitively, as you get more trained, you already are processing some of those assessments, or you already know. And another person might not get it as quickly. And I think that's true of what you're saying, looking for sure. And also reading about the artist, because I remember once, here's a really good example. When I taught at George Mason, we'd go take the art bus up to New York once a month. And a lot of these kids had never been up to New York. And you go around to the galleries. We were in Chelsea at this gallery. And I always go up to the person at the desk and said, could you please come over? We have a couple questions. I said to the kids, don't be afraid to ask, what am I looking at? Because they get a little intimidated, and when you walk in with a group of students, so you're kind of like, they have to acknowledge you. So we were looking at a projection of a photograph of a man's portrait. There were two giant screens, and one had a white background, projector, and the other had sort of yellowy back. It was like off-white. And I was talking to the students. I was like, well, maybe there's a reason that there are these two different same portrait. Why does this guy have a yellow background and this one have white? And I I go to the gallery assistant. I said, so why is there a difference in color? He goes, oh, well, that was just the projector and the bulb burned out. So we just put a bulb that we had in the projector. So here we're overreading into the content of what we're looking at. And it was just a mechanical thing, so it's just such a subjective thing on some level. And of course, the artist, when you're making your work, sometimes I'll have a piece of art that I think is so great. I'm like, why hasn't anybody collected this? And then I always feel like the work chooses the person. But what I see in it and what they see in it are maybe two totally different things. But that's the beauty of art, is like you're creatively thinking, and it doesn't have just one answer. But I was like, the light bulb was just burned out. So we just grabbed the bulb we had here. So who knows? But I do think we don't look long enough.
The story about the light bulb color changing because of the replacement made me think of the Sam Gilliam school bus prints that you did, which are essentially squares of color, and they're different shades of this, screaming yellow that various school buses use. And they're gorgeous. They're very minimal. They're beautiful.
Right.
And I immediately went to busing kids.
Oh.
Back in 54, whenever that poor little girl was, taken to a different school because they wanted to desegregate all the schools.
Right.
And I have no idea if Sam was thinking anything like that, but that's exactly where I went, because he's a Black artist and because, he was in it when he was a kid, I'm sure. And for me, it added layers to it that just made it so powerful. But I have no idea if Sam was thinking that.
Well, I would love you to write something on it, but there was a bus that went by his window on 14th Street. That's the school bus let out at 3:15. And so, you could well be, because those are insights that I would never have thought of. Wouldn't that be something? But someone looking at them, a lot of people that look at them, it doesn't look like Sam, and I don't get it. And it's just three squares, and so there you have that's just the simplest, elegant image you could have, right? And I think that's what's really important about printmaking, which is the best of all the disciplines ever, is because you can bring kids in to make a print with an artist. They can actually see. What I've learned is when the artist comes in, even if they're printmakers, they're deconstructing their work and then they're putting it back together again. And it always informs their next work. I swear to God, every person that's made some prints here that I've experienced, the print has triggered work in their painting, in their sculpture, in ways that I don't know how it happens. I don't know, but I do really believe that that's what I love about printmaking, is the problem solving, because it's so, every step of the way you're thinking very distinctly about what you're going to do next. Maybe not thinking about the final image, but you're definitely thinking, what's the next step to get to the next place? And in painting, I mean, I know you covered up, or I shouldn't say that, but I don't know. But I feel like that's why I like it the best of all, because it is the best. It is the best.
Yeah, I think the painters, they always get a little trash talk from me. I'm sorry, painters. I mean, it's so direct. You stick some color on something and you're done. But the print people, because they have to break it into steps, have to give more consideration to every last bit of it. Mm-hmm. And I think it's just a more thoughtful process, Yeah,
I remember in undergrad, I had a painting professor, and he hated printmaking. He goes, it's indirect because, you're not directly in touch with it. You have to have one step in between. So I started making prints. Even the printmakers, and even in the print seminar in grad school, silkscreen was definitely the bastard of all of them. And so all these people would be in there, smelling the ink and oozing over the litho washes. And I ended up breaking up the flats. I did these Oriental rug, which are the patterns that led through my life, but I broke them up into little dots, like hand dot drawing, and broke up. So the pattern was a rug, but it was all like And so they were all, oh, look at this. Look at the little dots in there. It's like, I did that to prove to some of those macho print guys that it was, it was just as good as their esteemed lithographs. But there was quite a prejudice against a lot of definitely silkscreen. But I mean, it's interesting, the way we grow up and what we're taught and how we perceive things. But back to my original saying is the fact that printmaking is community and you need more bodies to help you do things. You just do. But you learn by doing it, and it's so hard to tell somebody what a print is. I mean, when I've taught so many years, and even collectors and people that come to the studio, like they glaze over, like but once you physically do an etching and you realize, oh, the aha thing is, I get it now, but it's hard to describe it. I remember interviewing Jack Lemmon he's in the Midwest Matrix. He goes, and the moment comes when you lift up the paper and you go, oh, and he goes, even it looks like shit. You go, oh. I think that part isn't in there, but and he says in there, I would, quote him, it's the magic. It's just magical what happens.
That does seem like the way to get non-believers in is to stick them in a print shop next to a press and have them watch the printing process. I mean, making could be cool to watch. All the play could be cool to watch, but the reveal is really the magic, right?
Yeah.
And Phil Sanders always says, give me 10 minutes with a person and I'll have them sold on prints, standing in the shop watching me print something. He's absolutely right. Like you got to see it to really understand it.
Well, the Washington Print Club has made several visits to the studio, but the last time they came, I did a little hands-on silkscreen project because, me talking is okay, but my assistant Adrisa, we exposed some screens and we did a print, and it was just a swirl with a blend. I had some squares from another demo that we printed, and everybody got to come up and pull the squeegee. And they all wanted their own print. They put their names, and I am telling you, I'm sure that they went home and they probably put them in a frame, like they made them. And it was, it was just like a little blend of a square that was on there. And then we had exposed a couple of images and we printed. And they were back in grade school. And it was the best thing since that had ever happened. And it's so much more impactful than, of course, they like the prints that they're seeing, but they were doing it. And they got to take it home. And one lady goes, you took mine. That's my name on it. They all look the same. You can put your name on it.
That's funny. Yeah, I think that is the trick. That's a great idea, having people pull the screen squeegee.
Or crank.
Yeah, I like it. I like it. All right. So is there anything coming up immediately that we all should know about?
More exhibits in the future, more print fairs. Baltimore Print Fair. Yeah, I have more artists coming into work, like Corey. We're starting some new work. And so, yeah, just working on documentaries. I just hope to release the Lloyd Menard, documentary. I want to put it online soon or have like a screening announcement. Oh, I got an award from the American Printmaking History. I'm embarrassed what it is.
APH, blah, 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 blah. Nice.
I got a scholar award for my work in the history of printmaking. So they're having a conference in January in New York, and I'm getting a little certificate, which I'm really proud of because those are like letterpress and they're historical, which I feel like validates the work. And the Black Printmakers is going to be shown in DC. Martin Luther King Library does great public programs. So we're working with high school kids and having a printing press in there and, doing more hands-on kinds of things.
Oh, that's great. Got to grab them early.
Yes, but I'm looking forward to just making more work and trying to stay happy and sane in a crazy world.
Yeah. As we're recording this, we're a week out from the election. So we are all, no matter what your side, we are all nervous.
Be glad it's over.
Some of us are freaking out.
Yes, I know. Yeah. Well, I did have one more thing to tell you that's really interesting. I was invited by Sang-Mi Yu. Do you know Sang-Mi? She's a wonderful printmaker. I went to Texas Tech University to meet with the students and show the Black printmakers. But what's incredible is Peter Briggs has this archive there. He was the former curator at the Texas Tech Museum. It's got over 18,000 prints.
What?
Yeah, you need to go there. And
Whoa.
so Sangmi wanted me to select about 20 prints that they would pull, and we would have a conversation with students, like a seminar with the undergrad and the grads. So I went and I looked, and not everything's digitized, but there's a wonderful new curator there who's taken over. And I selected 20 prints that were all made from 1976 to about the early 80s because it related to the Midwest Matrix idea. Because I started college in 1976. That's when I went to school. And that's when I first kind of entered into the printmaking awareness. And Jane Abrams, do you know her work? Jane Abrams, she's like a contemporary of Rochelle Toner. She was an IU grad student. Everyone revered her work. She was openly gay, but at the time, that wasn't as fluid as it is now. But her work had these like small etchings with like furry envelopes, sort of genitalia kind of implied. And then it was silkscreen and etching together. It was like George Washington and the flag, because there was like the end of the Vietnam War. There were all these references to what was happening. And so what I did was I had them lay them out, and some of them were Texas artists, and there were students that I knew were grad students when I was an undergrad, and Rudy Pizzotti. And there were some other fabulous ones I just was drawn to. And what I saw was some of the first collagraphs. Someone had printed their bra. But it was printed in like military colors, and in the top of the pockets of the print of the cusps were like tents, like soldiers' tents.
Oh.
But it was like things that we were learning at the time. There was a lot of trompe l'oeil, masking tape with shadows and things. And I was printing masking tape, and I was doing a lot of the things that I saw. There was the 4-color CYMK etchings, yellow, red, blue, black. There was photography, like silver, what do you call it? Silver.
Gelatin silver?
Yes, yeah. Like beautiful black and white photographs, because photography was becoming its own thing. And I remember doing photography. And some of the subjects were politics, the war, gender issues. It was Watergate. It was feminism. It was equal rights. It was civil rights. It was all these things. And so I brought it to the attention to the students and to myself, because we're in a time right now that is so much like tumultuous things that were happening. And I said to the students, if you look at the work here, does it look like it could have been made today? And it could have, although there were oil-based silk screens everywhere. And there were also Midwestern landscape and beautiful engraving. There were beautiful washes, lithographs, Kent Rush, the sky. There were all these different people. And it was really revealing to me, because that's what I was learning when I was in school at that time. And there was this grad student named Jane Abrams. She was the first woman to be given tenure at University of New Mexico, Albuquerque. Her work now is floral and completely different from what she was making. It's just the time lapse. And I said to these kids, when I went to school, I was your age, I asked them to walk around and say, instead of me talking, I said, what is the print you're attracted to? What do you think the artist is trying to say? And what might you use from this work in your own work? And that was like opening of the conversation, because a lot of students today in universities are in different camps politically. I mean, it's tough being a teacher now. It's tough being a student now. So it was pretty interesting. But on that note, I would just say that if we go back and look at the history, it can help us understand the present. And it may not make it any more comfortable, but things are in cycles, So anyway, that's all
I like that. I like that conversation starter. Those are great questions. Mm-hmm. Nicely done, Professor.
Yeah, there was this one etching, and it was beautiful. It was like, it looked like a hill, like explosions, like war, but it was actually penises. And everybody got up there close, and I was like, oh, so look, we had penises back then too. Like, everything was like, and your vagina and your, I mean, just in terms of they think they own, you know what I mean? Remember our bodies, ourselves, and everything, all those things.
Oh,
I mean,
yes.
anyway, okay, I'm dating myself.
I still have my copy.
I do too.
Well, Susan, it's been lovely talking to you. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you, Anne. Thank you for having me, and more success with your fabulous podcast.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Platemark with my guest, Susan Goldman. I hope you enjoyed it. She's a delight. I enjoy talking to her, as I always do. Remember, Lily Press is an exhibitor at the Brooklyn Fine Art Print Fair coming up this very week. It's exciting, but nerve-wracking. Anyway, come see us in Brooklyn. It's going to be an awesome show. And head over to brooklynprintfair.org and get your tickets and come see us. All right. Thanks to Susan for being a great guest. I appreciate her time, as always. And a thank you to Dan Fury of Extension Audio for being my sound guy. Thanks, Dan. And one also to Michael Diamond for the use of his original music. And then my last one goes to Skip Barnhart and Lee Turner for sending me soundscapes from their print studios. Images that Susan and I talked about are over in the show notes at platemarkpodcast.com. And I think that's it. If you have a mind, hit support and donate when you're over on the website and help me keep the lights on here. I'd appreciate it. All right, we'll see you next time.